everybody to please stand for the Star Spangled Banner, sung by Mudelio, accompanied by the Fort Salonga Community Band.
Oh, say, can you see my dawn's early light, what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner
And now I'd like to introduce to you the president of the American Airpower Museum, Jeffrey Kleinman.
Thank you. I still don't get any. But seriously, I'd like to welcome you all to the American Airpower Museum, especially our distinguished guests we are honoring here today. My name is Jeff Kleinman, as Larry mentioned, and I'm the president of the museum. I'm proud of what our volunteers have accomplished here in the last 20 years. Although the museum was originally based in New Jersey, we were fortunate to find space here at Republic Airfield, which is an historical location in its own right, being the original airfield where Republic Aircraft Corporation is located. We are now in the final assembly building, where the guns and ammo and other government-furnished equipment were installed in the 9,000 P-47 Thunderbolt fighters that were produced here during World War II and rolled out these doors right here onto this ramp, and were flown to bases in Connecticut, Massachusetts, and then packed up and shipped over to Europe, and then eventually to the Pacific. I believe more than a few of our distinguished guests, visitors, are well acquainted with the Thunderbolt, since those planes came in handy in the winter of 1944 and the spring of 1945, saving countless lives of our fighting men on the ground. So I find it fitting that we're in this historic building today, recognizing the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II, and have the honor of recognizing the service of veterans of that conflict who put their lives on the line so that we can enjoy, and I also hope appreciate, the freedoms which we enjoy today in the United States of America, which most people in the world can only dream about. Our museum is what we call a living history museum, where the machines, be they aircraft or vehicles, all operate and are fully functional, as much as they were 75 years ago. That our guests and visitors are informed not only about the machines, but more importantly about the men and women who served in them selflessly and gave of themselves to preserve our freedoms today. We have exhibits which are interactive and are teaching tools to visitors, young and old, American or foreign-born, who have not been taught how past events have shaped our present-day society. So many school curriculums are so lacking in teaching of American history. Our living history format is founded on the people. People like yourselves, who we are honoring today, for believing in our country and willing to sacrifice all that is dear to preserve it. Sure, it's idealistic. Sometimes it even sounds a little bit lofty, because more often than not, there are many times in combat when you find yourself fighting for your buddies next to you. The guys you serve with day in and day out. Sometimes idealism takes a back seat to fighting to save the guys next to you who depend on you or have your back. But we're here today to recognize and honor your service to your fellow soldiers, sailors, and airmen, as well as to your country. I didn't memorize this. It's not my style. I would like to present each of you, veterans from World War II, a special certificate of appreciation for our museum in helping us recognize a momentous event 75 years ago, when on August 15, 1945, the Japanese stopped fighting, finally, and then on September 2nd, 1945, on the deck of the USS Missouri, battleship USS Missouri, papers were signed officially ending the most destructive conflict of arms in our history. Finally, and you could all go back to your homes. We also remember and pray for those who couldn't return, because you're a living testament to those men and women, and we are so proud of you. Thank you for making the trip here to help us remember. Now I'd like to call Robert Scarabino of the 101st Airborne Reenactors Group. Robert?
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for being here today. As Jeff alluded to, history, an important aspect of every society, every country, this civilization. When I think back on reflecting on what's been going on in the last 6 months in this country, it seems like two very, very important events went under the radar. The first event that went under the radar was something called VE Day. VE Day was victory in Europe. It was when the U.S. Army and all its allies achieved victory over Nazi Germany and their tyranny of the European continent. And when we think of VE Day and when we think of the European continent, we usually hear names like Eisenhower, Patton, Omar Bradley, General McCall, all the upper brass. And then as we move through and we get to August and some things were done to bring the Japanese oppression and tyranny under control in the Pacific Theater, we celebrate in the United States September 2nd as VJ Day, victory over Japan. And there we're associated with names as Douglas MacArthur, Admiral Nimitz, Admiral Halsey. But there are other people that served in this war. To over 16.3 million American men and women served our nation during the World War II conflict. Santos Scolacciati served in the 101st Airborne. Howard Baker in the 45th Infantry Division, Joe Lorticina in the 82nd Airborne Division, Vinnie Greco in the 100th Infantry Division, and the list goes on and on and on. These men and these women, on average, were born between 1918 and 1926. They were born during a time when there was a Great Depression. And the Great Depression is nothing like we could ever imagine. Everybody here at this museum today knows what the Great Recession is. And when, as a wise economic professor once told me in college, when he was prompting his students to tell them, what's the difference between a recession and a depression? Well, a recession very simply is, it's when your neighbor's out of work. A depression is when you're out of work. And almost every American during the 30s, after the stock market crashed in 29, were out of work, on their knees, with very, very little. And then something called Pearl Harbor happens on December 7th of 1941. And men from all over the country leave whatever they're doing, whatever meager earnings they're doing, whatever family they were caring for, and they drove to the draft boards. They were drafted, they were volunteering. There were some men that were in OCS, there were some that were in Army Specialized Training Programs. Some went into the Marines, some went into the Navy, some joined a voluntary group called it Airborne, which is experimental. And they left their homes and they called their country's cry to defend justice and tyranny. Because while the depression is going on in this country, globally there were things called communism and fascism and imperialism and Nazism. And they answer the country's call to defend freedom and liberty for all people on this planet. And it's these men and women, and the men especially today, that are here that we need to honor. Civilian soldiers of the greatest generation that came back. And you represent today all the heroes, the men and women that you left behind in foreign soil, who can't be here today to enjoy what you did. The family, the growth, the aspect of putting behind what you did. And you were so quiet and so humble about it. So today we'd like to recognize you. The brave men, unselfish men, full of courage and valor that came back and honor us so today by being here. Living testament and proof of what happened 75 years ago is true. And we shall not forget. So, with that being said, and I'm going to ask some family members to help out, and Roger Kilfoyle, we are going to announce your name. I would like you to stand up, and then as you stand up, Jeff is going to come over and give you a certificate. So the first gentleman I'd like to introduce is Mr. Gene Levy, a personal fan favorite of mine, 94 years old, born in Brooklyn, raised in Queens. Enlisted in September of 1943 into the U.S. Army at age 18, trained to be a specialist, and then was put into the infantry, served in I Company of the 398th Regiment of the 100th Infantry Division, and fought in the Battle of the Bulge. As Gene will humbly tell you, he fought in the Bulge, but he fought in the other Bulge, and he was humbly known as the Sons of Bitch. Aren't you, Gene? Next, we have Mr. Joseph Salvatore Randazzo, with one of the coolest birth dates I could ever imagine. He was born on 6/6/1926. Born in Brooklyn, served in the 75th Infantry of the 291st Regiment of Company G. He also served during the Battle of the Bulge, and as some of you that saw on our display, was assigned to that M1918 machine gun, 30 caliber. Next is Mr. Bud Roche. Mr. Roche served in the Army Air Corps. He achieved the rank of Tech Sergeant, and he served from January of 42 right through July of 46. He was a B-24 radio operator, and he flew over 51 missions and was shot down over the oil fields of the Pelosi on his 35th mission. Thank you, Mr. Roche. Mr. Albert Gallo. Born on July 9th, 1923. Served in the 506th Artillery Battalion. Al and his two brothers were drafted and proudly wore the uniform of our country during World War II. In 45, Gallo was in the Pacific Theater of Operations on an LST, a landing ship tank, circling the Japanese homeland island of Iwo Jima. His anti-aircraft artillery unit was assigned to the 5th Marine Corps Division, and on D+4, he witnessed the United States Marine raising the flag on Mount Suribachi. Thank you for your service. Next we have Mr. T, Mr. Carl Trengali. Hey, with a mask on, we all look the same, don't we, folks? Born and bred in Brooklyn, born on September 29th of 1924, Carl is a plank owner of the USS Barber, DE-161, a destroyer escort. The ship is named in honor of the three brothers, Malcolm, Ronald, and Leroy Barber, who were all killed aboard the USS Oklahoma at Pearl Harbor on December 7th of 41. A plank owner is a sailor who was an original crew member when the ship was first commissioned. The destroyer was assigned to an anti-submarine warfare killer group in the Mediterranean, and in April of 1944, Carl Schiffer and the crew sank the German U-boat U-488 in the Mid-Atlantic. Thank you, Paul, for your service. Next is Dr. Richard Lang. Richard, affectionately known as Dick, was born on October 24th of 1924. He served in the U.S. Army 94th Infantry Division of the 376th Regiment. Richard was a pre-med college student when he was drafted in 43. His division endured 209 days in combat. 195 of them were those days were consecutive. The 94th was part of the General Fort Patton Army. The Germans gave the division its nickname Roosevelt's Butchers for stacking and just basically treating the enemy the way they needed to be treated. Thank you, sir. Here I'm going to ask you, the Roger of the family, to help out with a little bit on the bio. Next is Mr. Ahmad Tarantelli.
There you go.
Oh, Jesus, you're killing me. Okay. Ahmad is a veteran from Mount Vernon, New York. He was drafted at the age of 18 with 22 of his friends. He served in the 14th Liberation Division of the United States Army. His unit was responsible for liberating thousands of prisoners, both Allied and displaced personnel camps. He is married to his wife for more than 69 years. Together they have 3 children, 6 grandchildren, 2 great-grandchildren. He retired from Levittown Public School District. He was an industrial arts teacher for 34 years, Division High. And as on a personal note, I went to Island Trees, so we were quite the division, both rivals in both wrestling and football. And you kicked our ass in football, but we got you in wrestling. Thank you a lot. I'm going to ask for some assistance again from Mr. Bob Fritz. Bob Fritz over here, am I right? Bob served in the U.S. Navy aboard the USS Monterey. He was on a CBL-26. Bob, why don't you tell us what ship that was? What is a CBL-26? He was on an aircraft carrier. He was a machinist mate, second class. He was only 18 years old. Yeah, like a lot of guys at age 17 and a half, he punched the paper so he could get into the 4A. Thank you so much. Next, Mr. Frank Agolia. Come on, Frank, stand up, baby. You know you got a new hip. I'm jealous. I need a new hip. He got it. He was next in line. They told me COVID came in. I had to wait. Frank served in the 325th Glider Regiment of the 82nd Airborne Division. You're looking at a man that hit Norman soil, or should I say the Normandy Peninsula France, on the morning of June 6th. He was in a glider, and when his glider hit the ground, the nose hit, flipped over, and split in two. Frank walked away and continued doing business with the rest of the group. He later served in Operation Market Garden, and after that, the Germans had enough of him, and they shipped him home for some recuperation. Frank, thank you so much. Next we have a very young and dapper Ed Doria. Where's Ed?
Dionian.
Dionian, I corrected, by the Commander-in-Chief of the Dionian family. This gentleman is 99 years old. I stand corrected, 99 years young. How silly of me. Ed served in the Army Air Corps. He was a tech sergeant, T5. He served from November of 42 through April of 46. He was a mechanic, and he worked on a lot of recon planes, reconnaissance planes, the Piper. And he served in the 96th Division of the 724th Air Force Battalion. God bless you, sir, and thank you for your service. Next up is a very modest man that I met for the first time today. His name is Mr. James Mango. Paging Mr. Mango. Paging Mr. Mango. Oh, I got it. He's a waist gunner, so he just needed to just get reacquainted with a 50 caliber machine gun. So if we send out a recon plane to go get this guy back here, I mean, you know, his once in a lifetime appreciation of here he is. They're getting him now. Don't worry, James. The war will wait. We're good. Or I should say the victory party. So, as he ambles over, Mr. James Mango served in the Army Air Corps. He was in the 8th Army Air Force. He was a PFC, a very modest PFC, because as I talked to him for 15 minutes, it finally took me to get him to tell me that he was a waist gunner in a B-17. If you're a waist gunner in a B-17, there are a lot of Messerschmitts that want to shoot at you. And for him to be standing here today is a minor miracle. James, thank you for your service.
Hold that up, honey.
Next up is Mr. Philip
Hold that
Howard.
like that. Yeah, that's right.
Served in the U.S. Army. He was an amphibious engineer, PFC in the Pacific. He served near the lakes of Guadalcanal in the South Pacific. Where's Mr. Howard? All right, I bet you he was with James on the other 50 cal, wasn't he? And he's going back again. Okay. All right, if we circle back with Mr. Albert, we'll go back to him. And not last but not least of our Baker's Dozen 13 today is the American Airpower Museum's very own Mr. Bob Edelson, who served in Company K of the 350th Regiment of the 88th Infantry Division during the Italian campaign. Where's Bob? Is Philip still a WWII or? Okay. That concludes all of our certificates. So I would like everybody to stand, except for the gentlemen that were honored, and give these gentlemen a huge round of applause for serving their country and representing the true greatness in America and all of that. Thank you, everybody.
I'd like to thank everybody here
paying tribute to these gentlemen who are our American treasures. They represent our history, they represent those that didn't come home, and they represent a lot of what we have today that we take for granted. And if we take a minute just to reflect on the sacrifices that so many had to make so many years ago, maybe that will give us some insight into how we should look to our own future and the kind of country that we really want to see. Thank you very much for coming to the American Airpower Museum. We hope you come back. And that concludes today's proceedings. Thank you very much.